It's just information. It's a cosmic weather report telling us where the planets are at any given point and how those energies, vibrations, are impacting where we are in our particular lives. And it's up to us to either incorporate that information or not. It's just like the farmer. The farmer knows to plant his seeds or her seeds every year in the spring. There's nothing preventing the farmer from planting those seeds in December. They're not going to grow, but they could do it if they want. Wouldn't the farmer be better advised to follow the forecast and place those seeds at a time, plant those seeds at a time when there's an optimal chance of growth? Now, here's the other thing. Just because the farmer plants them on time doesn't mean he or she might not experience drought or gushers or locust or anything else. And it isn't a guarantee that it's going to be smooth sailing, but their chances are enhanced by planting at the optimal time, as opposed to a time when there's no chance of any growth occurring.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Michael Spremulli. He is an astrologer. Now, I'm curious as how we're going to tie this in with my Positive Vibes show. This would be a topic I usually do on my paranormal show. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hey, well, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we'll tie it in under 2 minutes. So I'm actually a corporate personality profiler turned astrologer, which has been 20 some odd years in the making. So how I got into astrology was many, many years ago. Someone gifted me a reading. I didn't really believe much in it, didn't know much about it, but I said, all right, sure, you're paying. I'll go. Why not? I'll have a reading. I'm open to new experiences. And the astrologer proceeded to tell me in the hour that we had together, key things that had happened in my life up to that point, current things that were happening, and even plans that I was considering making down the road. And I said, well, that's interesting, because I didn't know this person from Adam. And the person who gifted me the astrologer was more of a work colleague. So they didn't know the intricacies of my life. And that was sort of the hook that got placed there. And over the years, I studied things and studied astrology, dug deep into it. And what made me reach out to you to be on your show, here comes the tie-in, is the type of astrology that I practice is actually called vibrational astrology. That's no joke. You can Google that. David Cochran is the father of modern vibrational astrology. He's still at it doing research, and I'm actually studying with him currently. And the idea behind vibrational astrology is that everything vibrates. Everything resonates at different frequencies. You see a lot of talk online about raise your vibration, get to higher emotional vibrations as opposed to lower. Well, vibrational astrology really is looking at how the various planetary bodies vibrate in certain resonances and how that sets the stage for certain things to either flow easily or maybe not so easily. But VA is all about maximizing those opportunities so that you're aware of when you could take advantage of certain things. And I will add, vibrational astrology is the only form of modern astrology that is evidence-based, meaning there's actually scientific controlled studies that back up the claims, and there's no really other version of modern astrology that can make that claim because there really isn't much science. So that's me in a nutshell. And 30 years and 2 minutes.
And this is different than what you read in the newspaper, right? Because
totally. So let me ask you a question. When you think of astrology, what thought comes to mind? And be brutally honest, because I can tell, I've heard it all. I've had every preconceived notion. You're not going to offend me. When you think of astrology, what comes to mind?
Well, my birth sign, which I'm a Libra.
Okay.
And quite honestly, the first thing that pops in my mind is the horoscopes that you read in the paper, and they're so broad. I mean, I could see why people would fall for it because it is so broad. I mean, something important is going to happen to you today. Okay.
Yeah, right. So your response is very typical for most folks when you initially bring up the subject of astrology. And daily horoscopes have their place. Let's go ahead and talk about that, get that out of the way now, because people ask me. I actually write daily horoscopes, but here's my caveat with that.
Mm-hmm.
Daily horoscopes, in my opinion, are like the junk food of the astrology world. Meaning everybody likes a little junk food every now and then that really isn't all that good for us, but you don't want to make a steady diet from it. Meaning, I never encourage people to make any type of important decisions based on any daily horoscope that's written, including the ones that I write, because of what you said, Kyle, and that is they have to be so generalized to hit a wide swath of people. And the dailies are written generally based on the birth sign, which is the sun sign that everyone's familiar with, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, can't they go all the way around the zodiac to all 12 signs. So when I write daily horoscopes, I actually do look at what's going on in the sky, because basically astrology tracks what planets are moving through different segments of the sky, and look at what those involvements would be between the different planetary cycles and what signs they're in. But to compress all that down to a 1 or 2 sentence thing, it's got to be broad. So to your initial question, the work that I do individually with people, and when I consult with individuals and companies and whatnot, it's nothing like the sun sign astrology that you read online or in the newspapers, if they still exist, and places like that. Because what we're doing is totally different. When we do a birth chart for someone, I need their birth time, date, location, and then I could run it through some very sophisticated cutting edge software that calculates the exact placements of where all the planets were at the time that someone was born. And that becomes your own private little circuitry board or game board, meaning your birth chart, that never changes because it's a snapshot in time of where the planets were placed at the time of your birth. And the theory in vibrational astrology is that these are various circuits that we have to work with throughout our life. No one person is going to be able to activate all of those circuits. There may be things that are in your birth chart that are latent or you haven't even tapped into. That's okay. No one can do them all. And then there are certain circuits that just might be missing altogether. And that's fine too. The idea is to figure out what circuits you've got, figure out the ones that most resonate with you, and then leverage those. So yeah, actual consultation astrology is completely different than anything that appears in the papers. But I'm grateful for the horoscopes in the papers because it keeps awareness out there. It gets people to ask questions. So everything's got its place. At least that's my perspective.
Yeah, I'll watch videos like on YouTube, and people start making fun of this kind of stuff. And I mean, honestly, I've gotten more into, like my wife, she is so big into crystals and all that. And, you know, I'll from time to time think, oh, this is a bunch of hooey. But then again, when you talk about vibrations, these crystals actually have a vibration to them.
Well, there you go. There you go. And the idea behind VA, unlike many other different systems out there, including religion, not that we're going to get into a discussion on that, but VA is like, it encompasses everything. When you look at vibrational astrology, it's not saying, well, if you follow this, you can't follow religion or politics or other systems that you live by or are governed by. Everything is included. You can be involved in mystical type of things like tarot cards or crystals and still utilize vibrational astrology, because all it's doing is taking information from a higher dimension and making it accessible to us at this dimension. And with the recent stuff that's been coming out of physics research now, it's really interesting to follow what's going on, because the physics is finally catching up with what the ancient astrologers have been saying for all these years. And they had an example of, you take a particle and split it. And I'm not a physicist, so pardon my crude description here. You take a particle and split it. You put one over here and the other one over here, whether it's miles or feet, I don't recall. But what they would discover is that when you make changes to this particle, this one would end up having some reaction. The idea that everything is entangled, even though it might be miles apart. These are things that ancients have been saying for, millennia. But now things that appeared to be very, very weird in its day are like, there's something going on there. And that's the part that was fascinating to me, because my background is that of a science background. So people look at me and say, wait a minute, you got all this advanced training in psychology and you interpret all these assessments and there's a lot of data behind that. How do you square that with astrology? Well, I had a hard time squaring it until vibrational astrology came along, because I always knew there was something to astrology until we got to the point of trying to jam something into a category that wasn't quite there. I said, no, that's where it kind of falls flat for me. I need more discrete evidence. And vibrational astrology it's the future. I'm not going to say it's going to eliminate other forms of astrology, because I'm sure they'll continue to move on and evolve over time, but it's definitely going to carve out its own unique place, which I think is very exciting.
Talking about the crystals again.
Yeah.
And, people that make fun of it, they don't realize, crystals have been used in computers and watches. It's because of the vibrations that they put off. And
are you familiar with the piezo electric effect? I'm going to geek out on you here for a second.
That's over my head.
Okay, so it's over my head too, but I remember it from high school physics class. The idea is, when you have a watch or different things that will beep, and sometimes you'll push on a device and every time you press it, it makes a noise or whatnot. Before they had speakers and iPhones and all that, they'd get those noises from crystals. And the way that they do that is pass a current through it. And that's referred to as the piezoelectric effect, where you put a specific current through a crystal and it makes an audible tone. So there's a lot going on that I don't even pretend to know about crystals that's happening under the hood, but I do know the one thing that's common, and that is it all comes down to vibrational or oscillating energy. And that's the whole deal behind crystals.
I guess I've kind of always been wishy-washy. I'm on the fence about a lot of things.
Yep.
But I am a paranormal investigator, and I have actually experienced ghosts and things like that. Captured it on film, and I have a psychic that works with us. And I used to think, man, psychics, it's a bunch of baloney. There's no way. They just, they probably have a way of looking at you and telling if they're getting close, to whatever it is they're trying to tell you. But the psychic that I have working with us, she's a friend of ours, and she absolutely told stuff that there is no possible way that she could have known. And I mean specific things, down to when my grandfather passed away. She knew it was that day.
Oh, wow.
And I could go on and on, just different things that she's told us that was true, and then she's also made predictions for us. And I'm like, okay, it's been 2 years. This hasn't happened yet. Why has this not happened? What's, am I doing this to block it? What's the deal? And I hear people make fun of stuff like astrology, but then I think maybe there's something to it. And you're saying there's something scientific to it.
We're just now starting to be able to codify a lot of claims that have been made throughout astrology over the years through controlled studies. Here's an interesting one that you may find interesting, as well as your listeners. When you look at astrologers on YouTube and TikTok and all the other platforms, 99% of them are talking about sun sign astrology. They'll say that the following 3 signs are going to get really beat up over the next few days, and these signs are going to be lucky and whatnot. Okay, that's cool. I'm not here to knock anyone else's practice, but here's what I can tell you that the research has indicated thus far. The signs, at least from a vibrational astrology perspective, they're not as important as we thought they were. They
Okay.
give a little flavor or color, you know, how Aries may be pioneering a little bit and they want to kind of carve their own way in the world, and Capricorns are practical and you know, might be a little detached, but they don't have the influence that some would have you believe. It ultimately comes down to the planetary aspects or the planetary configurations, because each planet in vibrational astrology is responsible for regulating one particular process. So where the magic happens is when these planets form different angular distances in birth charts and how in the sky and how that relates to your birth chart. That's when those different circuits that I mentioned before get activated. And if you think, people say, well, what are you talking about? Energy and planets. Here's a real simple example. It's not a perfect example, but you'll get the idea.
Mhm.
When you go outside on a really, really hot day, what do you feel? And this
Oh,
is not a trick question.
I feel the heat.
You feel the heat. You feel the energy from the sun,
Mhm.
because the sun is within our solar system at a point where we can actually feel some of that energy. All right. So the sun is emitting that type of energy. It literally shines a light on whatever it is that you're doing and brings things into the current situation. Well,
Mhm.
the idea is that every other planet, when you go beyond the sun, you know, we've got the sun, we've got Mercury, we've got Venus, Mars, all the way on out to Pluto. And yes, we still use Pluto, even though NASA demoted Pluto. Each of those planets have a unique energy field associated with them.
Mhm.
And the idea is, even though we might not be able to feel it like we feel the sun, it has an impact. So Jupiter, for example, whenever Jupiter comes in contact with, the energy there tends to be expansive and makes things bigger and blows things up. Now that can go a couple of different directions. If you're in a situation where you're working toward a goal and you're heading toward the finish line, that could be very abundant. It can make things more grand and larger than life and add to whatever it is that you're working on. If it's aspected with some other planets, it could actually blow things up in a negative way. It can increase addiction or anger or frustration. So what makes astrology so specific, and from a vibrational astrology standpoint, is looking at what is the combinations of these planets that are in play at any given point. And it's almost like a recipe. You know, a recipe has multiple ingredients, and you get the ingredients a certain way, you're going to taste maybe one being a little bit more predominant than the other. If
Mhm.
everything is even, none of them are really going to jump out, but you're going to get a final product that is going to be something that is enjoyable. If something's way out of whack, you're going to know that and you're going to feel it. You know, everyone talks about Mercury retrograde. It's probably the most common thing in
Yeah.
astrology. In fact, we're in it now for those who are tracking until May 14th, then it goes direct. And by the way, I'm not one of these astrologers who preaches the doom and gloom. You know, oh, it's going to be a rough few weeks. Look, there are going to be highs and lows in all of our lives. It's things to know about. This Mercury retrograde, yeah, I've had some technology issues. That's a big thing. But retrogrades are
Yeah.
time to step back and reflect and re-examine. And I have been doing a lot of that as far as ideas, because that's what Mercury regulates. It's the connection of ideas and transference of information. So when it's going retrograde, it's going to say, all right, well, maybe you need to re-examine some of your ideas and where you're headed. And that's cool. You know, I always cringe when it's like, oh, these placements are going to get really beat up over. Maybe, maybe not. It all comes down to the individual chart, and that's where it makes it unique and personal for us, because no one else in the world has your birth chart. Even if they were born at the same time, they weren't born at the exact same location in that operating room or wherever you might have been born. That's what makes it different, because your view of the sky is going to be different than someone else's depending on where you were.
So how long does it take to make one of these charts?
Well, to calculate one now in the old, let's go back to olden times.
Mhm.
When you had to do this by hand, it would take you an hour, because you'd have to look stuff up in an ephemeris, which is a table that tells you the exact planetary positions going back and forth through history. Because the planets can be calculated as far as where you end up looking at placements, we know where everything has been and where it's going to be. It's mathematical. That part, you know, is indisputable. Go into the astronomy world and they would confirm that. Now, generating the chart has become a lot easier due to the advent of computing power that we can have on our desktop. And even with the software that I run today, which is very, very specialized and very powerful, it still takes it a little bit of time to do some of the chugging if you got it to do some analysis, because there's a lot of calculations that need to be made. Still a lot more than having to do it by hand. But in general terms, to generate the chart doesn't take that much time. Going through the chart and the various vibrational charts, which are based off the original birth chart, that takes about a decent amount of time to look at where are the trends, what are we seeing that are the dominant themes that come out of things. So I always tell folks, a consultation with me lasts about an hour and change, but I'm spending a good hour the night before looking at your chart and kind of pulling all that information together so that it could tell the story. And it's not just a bunch of random stuff like you read in the paper, because inevitably every chart has a story, and it's my job to help bring that alive to people and then let them know how planets in the sky are impacting that chart in the here and now and 6 months and a year out. So it's, like anything else, you've got to put in the time, and then you got to understand what you're looking at, and then pull all that together so that the client can understand it. Because I can't speak astroese to the client. If they're into astrology, I'll tell them, well, Saturn's doing this or whatnot. And if they ask, I'll always let them know where I'm getting this information from. But I learned early on, if I try to get in and teach astrology during an actual a consultation, it gets in the way potentially, because there's so much. Astrology is a subject that has no bottom to it. And there's a lot of moving parts that have to be considered when doing an interpretation and a consult for someone.
So if, say, someone like me, I don't know specifics as far as what time I was born. I asked my mother, and she says, I think it was 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but I don't remember. I'm like, gee, I guess I'm not that memorable, huh, Mom?
Well, she was probably tied up doing other things, like, in labor. So I think I know where you're going, but go ahead with your question. As far as, if you don't know the time, how much does that impact things?
How does that impact things?
So the time for the most accurate chart, we really do need to get a birth time. Now, some astrologers won't work with a client if they don't have a birth time. There are some ways to get that, and I can tell you those in a second. But we try to at least narrow it down to some period. So the fact that you said it's somewhere in the afternoon, that means we know it's not in the morning. No, it's not at night. So you said what, somewhere between 4 to 5-ish was kind of your range?
Right.
And we'd probably use a chart time of 4:30. But now you obviously know where you were born, and location wise. That's important, because again, that signifies the view of the sky that you had at the moment of your birth. So we try to get as close as possible. Where that takes away some accuracy is on shorter term forecasting and predictions, because longer term predictions, planets generally move very slow. The outer planets like Pluto and Neptune, and even Saturn and Uranus, those are slower moving planets. When we get to the personal planets, which starts with the sun, the moon, and all that, that's when the birth time becomes really critical, because those planets move quick, and a matter of 30 minutes could put the actual planet into a different house and could have a different impact. So you do give up some accuracy, but it depends on what it is that you're wanting to use astrology for, because there's so many different reasons that you could use astrology to clarify your past, get an idea of what's happening in the present, looking at what's coming down the road. I'll share this for you and for your listeners' benefits. There are several ways that I've had people end up figuring out their birth time or discovering what it was, even if they weren't quite sure of it initially. So the first is obviously ask parents, family, friends, grandparents if they're around, because more often than not, someone will have a pretty good indicator. But let's say you come up with goose eggs there. Next thing you do is I recommend consulting a certified copy of the birth certificate. Not all of them, but most of them will have the time noted there as far as the time of birth. If you don't have a birth certificate, you could try contacting the hospital that you were born at, and they will gladly send you one for like $5. Again, sometimes it may or may not have the time on there, but I've had clients do that. And then here's sort of the bonus way to figure it out. See if your parents may have someplace a baby book for you, because usually on the first page, it says birth date and time, and it might be handwritten in there. In fact, that's how we discovered my wife's birth time was in her baby book, because she didn't have a copy of the birth certificate. She since got one and has confirmed it. But those are some places to kind of look around to hone in on that birth time if you are considering having a consultation done, because the more accurate you could be, the more accurate the astrologer can be.
Yeah, I'll have to see about the hospital thing, because the hospital I was born in has already been torn down, no longer there.
So somebody's got assume those records. They don't just generally throw those out.
Right.
And you know, I would start with in that community, and you might have to go on a little bit of a scavenger hunt. But very rarely do I find someone not being able to track down a birth certificate. And they'll track it down, and sometimes maybe they didn't record the time, but that tends to be the exception as opposed to the rule. And the time really ensures that you're looking at solid data and that things are not thrown off in the house system or any other factors that are involved.
All right. And I'll just have to try to see that they rebuilt the hospital, and maybe they still have those records, but I'm kind of curious.
What I would do is I'd start with the rebuild hospital and say, hey, I was born when this place was XYZ. Who assumed their records? Because I need a copy of my birth certificate. Because you have to be able to get one if you go for like TSA pre-check and things like that, where they need to prove your identity. Legally, they have to be able to get one to you, but you might have to jump through some hoops in order to get it.
Yeah, my mom had a little card that had it was my birth certificate, but I don't recall there being a time on there. But I'll go back and relook. Maybe it is on there.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
So
yeah,
how much does something like this cost?
Well, everybody charges different rates. I'll be very candid. I charge $250 for a natal consultation. And it's an hour and 15 minutes. So that includes me doing the research and then me working with someone. And most astrologers work with someone for 50 to 60 minutes. I always do an hour and 15 because I need to set the stage for what's going on. And I don't want that to get into the reading time. You know, I need to let people know what we can and can't do. You know, I'm not channeling your late Uncle Louie, and I'm not a crystal ball, and I'm not, you know, all these type of things. So we get all that out of the way. And then what that does is that enables me to focus on what are the areas that are important for an individual. And I always say during an intake form that I have people complete, tell me what you want to focus on, because going to an astrologer is very much like going to a physician. You can't go to a physician and say, I'm not feeling well. Figure it out. And it's like, whoa, okay, well, they can do that, but they're going to probably end up doing a lot more tests and spending a lot more money than necessary. And there's a more direct way about it, which is tell me your symptoms. So on the astrology side, it's tell me what you want me to focus on. You want me to look at the relationship section of your chart, the career or financial section, previous family encounters that you've had. What are we looking at? Because then I can spend the time when I'm doing the research and looking at the various aspects at play. I know what to put an emphasis on, and I'm not wasting a bunch of time telling someone about a relationship when they really want to figure out, hey, should I buy this business? And if so, when? So it's been said that when you hold someone's astrological chart in your hands, you're holding their whole life in your hands, past, present, and future. So we always need to narrow the scope as far as what it is that we're looking at. And I've got several clients, and they insist I keep it on the down low, and I understand that, who are they're business owners, and they actually look at the astrological timing when it comes to making major decisions in their business. Whether it's, hey, is it a good time to scale up or cut back or add a new product line? And I always tell folks, I'm not a crystal ball, and astrology is not a crystal ball. A lot of people think of it that way. What you need to think of astrology like is like a weather report, because a weather report tells you trends and gives you a forecast. It isn't 100%, but it's a lot better than nothing. So imagine the weekend's coming up and you want to go to the beach and you're planning to go to the beach and have a great time, but you look at the weather report the night before and it says, 80% chance of rain. Well, you've got a decision to make. You could either go to the beach knowing good and well that there's a strong probability that you might get rained on, or you may say, you know what, maybe we'll put it off till next week. But here's the thing. The astrology doesn't dictate what you do. It just gives you information. And I think that's where a lot of people get afraid of astrology, quite honestly. Yeah. They think that you open that door and it's like, you're opening the door to a poltergeist. And it's not, you're in the paranormal field. It's not that way. It doesn't work that way. It's just information. It's a cosmic weather report telling us where the planets are at any given point and how those energies, vibrations, are impacting where we are in our particular lives. And it's up to us to either incorporate that information or not. It's just like the farmer. The farmer knows to plant his seeds or her seeds every year in the spring. There's nothing preventing the farmer from planting those seeds in December. They're not going to grow, but they could do it if they want. Wouldn't the farmer be better advised to follow the forecast and place those seeds plant those seeds at a time when there's an optimal chance of growth? Now, here's the other thing. Just because the farmer plants them on time doesn't mean he or she might not experience drought or gushers or locust or anything else. And it isn't a guarantee that it's going to be smooth sailing, but their chances are enhanced by planting at the optimal time, as opposed to a time when there's no chance of any growth occurring. This is the way I like to explain astrology to people. And the response usually is, when you put it that way, it demystifies it. It makes a lot more sense. And that's part of my goal, to help demystify the woo-woo around astrology. There's actually a lot of science and math behind it and very little woo-woo.
I can tell you the weather forecast around here, you can't believe it at all. It's been 80 or 90% chance of rain for the last 4 or 5 days, and it hadn't rained a drop.
And where are you located? I'm not, what part of the country are you in?
I am just outside of Austin, Texas.
Okay. Keep Austin weird. Oh, yes.
Yeah. We say keep Austin weird and keep it in Austin.
Keep it in Austin. Fair enough. Fair enough. I will say, totally unrelated to anything, some of the best barbecue I ever had in my life was in Texas. I remember a while back, I was doing some work down there and I had to rotate between Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. And all three locations had very, very different regionalized barbecue that was really good. So there's that.
I will give it to Texas. We know how to barbecue.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. And the fact that, just being separated by a few cities, how different it was. And it was all delicious, but one is more brisket focused. Another one's more sausage focused. Who knew? I was getting a whole education.
So if we're talking about locations, if you were born, say like I was born outside of Houston, and now I live outside of Austin, does that affect the chart as well?
Well, it can affect, it affects future forecasting. So your birth chart you carry with you, and the energies of those planets are stamped into your serial number, so to speak. So when we calculate transits, so let's say you were coming to me and saying, hey, I want you to work up, my transits for the next 6 months to a year. Let me know what energy dynamics I can experience and what type of opportunities might be coming my way. We would always calculate that based on where you're currently living. So it doesn't change anything in your natal chart, but we always calculate the current transits based on your current locale, because we want to see how you interact with the view of the sky, which is where you are at this given moment. So and that's a very common practice. And if someone doesn't move, then we use the original point. And this is why, again, you can begin to see how the software there's a lot of moving parts under the hood, because all those things have to be taken into account. One thing too that has to be factored in that a lot of people don't realize is daylight savings time. Was that in effect at the time of your birth. And the database is continuously updated. Like, remember when we changed, now we just changed to standard time or daylight savings time, and it's supposed to be the last time that's going to happen. Well, if that is the case, then the program is going to go back into the software and flag that moving forward, anyone born in these zones, daylight savings time is not affected. There's a lot of things that need to be considered when you're looking at a real accurate and professional chart construction versus, just a quickie that you can get online. And, they have their points. If you plug in stuff in any of the websites that you see out there, you can get an idea of where your planets are placed. But when you start getting into forecasting, that's when you need to look at real specific information to make sure you're getting the best accurate data possible.
So you bring up a point, you go to some of these websites and you're able to kind of get a sample of what can happen. Do you do that too?
Well, so what I've got on my site is I don't, as far as a reading, there's no way to give a sample reading. The way I have an opportunity for people to dip their toe in the water is through astrological reports. And I think that's what you're referring to. So basically what that is we take someone's birth data, run it through the system, and then based on their aspects, a computer generated report comes out interpreting those aspects. And I keep those very economical. They're, the most expensive ones, like $24, I think, but that's a full natal report. And it's over 30 some odd pages. But there are samples out there for people to be able to see what you get back from those type of reports. And I recommend them in a couple of situations. If someone's not really ready to have a reading yet, they're a good way to dip your toe in the astrology waters. And you can do it privately and no one has to know, because believe it or not, there's a lot of stigma around people going to consult astrologers. No one wants to tell anyone. And I get it. I appreciate that. And I don't push anybody. So I try to have something available. If someone wants a full blown reading, I even have services specifically for businesses. We could jump into the full reading, or if they just want to kind of maybe do a transit report, there's a report like for $10, you get the whole month and it shows you what aspects are happening on every day so that you get an idea of what energies are at play. Now, is it as good as a one-on-one consultation? No, I'll be the first to tell you that. It's not, because it's interpreted in a vacuum as opposed to me looking at that data. But it's a decent starting point. And it's a good way to just have an idea of a foundation of what's going on in someone's chart. Reports, just like anything else, WebMD will never replace your doctor. Personal astrology reports are never going to replace an astrologer, but it's helpful to get an idea, just to kind of dip their toe in the water. And when people do that, it seems to make them a bit more at ease. And inevitably, it may be weeks or months later, they'll say, you know what, I think I want to jump on this and actually see what a reading is like. And inevitably, after a reading, people will say, well, that was nothing like I thought it was going to be. And they mean that in a positive way, because that's exactly what I thought when I went to that reader the very first time many years ago. In fact, they're still alive and they're still doing readings, and I still get a reading from them once a year, believe it or not, just for that. Probably 35 years in, still getting readings from this person. They're in their 80s. Yeah.
No, you do have a special offer going on right now, don't you?
I do. I have got so here's what we're going to do for you guys. I'm going to set up a special coupon code, and why don't we just say, well, I'll tell you what, we didn't plan this ahead of time. This is on the fly. The name of your podcast officially is?
Well, this particular show is Listen to the Vibes. The channel is the Vibes Broadcast. Okay.
Well, just because vibrational astrology and vibes might have a little overlap, why don't we do this? Listen. How about we use the word listen as the special word? Does that work? So anyone who types in the word listen, LISTEN, at checkout, that'll get them 20% off of a reading with me, which is actually a lot of money and probably too much, but I'm going to do it anyways. So 20% off. Listen, LISTEN, at the time of checkout, will take 20% off of a personal consultation, and as appreciation to you and your listeners. And we'll leave that up for about a month or so. I'm not sure when this goes live, but we'll figure that out. We'll give people plenty of time to take advantage of that. It won't be out there forever, so be mindful of that. But again, listen, and where you want to go to redeem that is at blueridgeastrology.com. Just as it sounds, I live in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So blueridgeastrology.com, click on consultations, and then you can choose what type of reading you want, and then type in listen at the point of checkout, and that'll take 20% off.
And you have social media that people can follow as well?
Absolutely. So on Facebook, Blue Ridge Astrology is the Facebook page. Same on Instagram, Blue Ridge Astrology, even on TikTok and YouTube. Pretty easy to find. We got it pretty consistent across all the platforms. I do post daily horoscopes on Facebook and Insta, and I do some TikTok stuff and longer form video content, some basic astrology, helping demystify some of that. That's on YouTube. So stick with blueridgeastrology.com. If you remember nothing else, Google that, and everything else should magically appear.
Man, have you thought about writing a book about all this stuff?
Eventually. It's here's the thing. I've actually been invited to participate in one of the research teams that is exploring vibrational astrology. And because it's so new, I don't want to write anything just yet. So, but that's in the works. And my goal would probably be to bring things to blend those worlds, because, you know, I'm a guy who's worked in the world of research and science, and now I'm on this side, and people are kind of looking at me like, what? Huh? How does that square? As well, I'm exactly the guy to square it, because I know how to read scientific data and literature, but I'm also open-minded enough to know that there's stuff out there that we haven't quite seen or discovered or been able to categorize yet. So if I could do my little part to maybe put a brick in the wall to blend those two, I think that would be pretty cool.
Have you ever gotten any kind of really strange or odd requests for a reading?
Not anything that's really out of whack. I mean, I've had situations that were kind of wild with, love triangles and affairs and all that sort of stuff. That is an interesting thing to note, that people will tell me or have told me things that they've told nobody else, including therapists, including spouses. And that's one of the things that I work very, very strongly from. And that is the code of conduct and ethics. You tell something to me, it's not going anywhere, as long as you're not threatening yourself or anybody else or putting anyone else in danger. Because a lot of times I'm the person people will open up to about that sort of stuff, because I'm not going to judge it. I'm a data point guy. So this is where I think I could bring my expertise from the personality assessment world and the psychology world into the astrological world, because I use the same standards that you would use in therapy as far as confidentiality and, not disclosing anything. And people need to feel safe when they do that. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting stories that may be in a book. Of course, the names will be protected to preserve the innocent, but nothing really out there, nothing that would be like, huh? But there's definitely some interesting things that have occurred over the years. I once had someone ask me to work up a chart for their cat. And believe it or not, you can do that. Here's the idea. There's a whole branch of astrology, and there's like 20, 30 different sub branches of astrology. There's a branch of astrology referred to as horoscope, where you ask a question, and the moment that you ask that question becomes the birth chart time. So you could do birth charts on anything that has a beginning. If you have the birth date and time of an animal, you can do a chart on them. I know it sounds crazy, but but I'm not an animal astrologer. There are people who specialize in that. And I don't know what to say about Kitty. There's really no way to confirm what's going on. Although I've got some people who are colleagues of mine, that's all they specialize in. And it's interesting, I know enough to not just write anything off. I've often said, I don't think we have ghosts in our house, but if we do, that's cool. They can live here as long as, they're cool to me. I'll be cool to them. I don't want to piss anybody off. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's plenty of room for everybody and everything, as long as nobody's causing harm to anyone. That's kind of the mindset that I try to approach things from.
I couldn't imagine. Oh, my cat needed to know if it should get some catnip right now.
Yeah, well, I can tell you the answer for that without needing to pull a chart together. Yes, yes, and yes. It's like asking a dog if it's hungry. Yeah, catnip? Sure.
Well, it would be interesting if you could get the information of someone who's passed away in a house And because I go into all kinds of cool places
Well,
and try to investigate ghosts. So
I'll tell you this. You see, here's the thing. You don't need to be alive. In fact, I've got a database that I have access to, and this is why the software is so complicated and expensive. It's got 90,000 famous people in it, complete with various degrees of birth certificate accuracy. The best form you can have is birth certificate in hand. You got a copy of it. It's referred to as AA accuracy. And then it kind of scales down from that where it's reported but not confirmed. But that's how we do research. We'll go, that's one of the ways, do extreme case sampling of looking at biographies of people who are long dead and gone and seeing what astro signatures they've got. So we should chat offline. If you could get information, including that birth date and time, that might be a fun little project at some point. If you go into a house and you got a little history, I could run the person's chart and I'll just tell you, I'll do an interpretation as if they were here and at least hit some highlights. That could be kind of fun.
yeah, I could see that being really integral in doing some of these investigations. So
Yeah.
I might have to try that sometime.
Absolutely, because and here's the thing, you're not going to have anyone there to confirm or deny things, but we'll be able to look at trends. Meaning, for example, if someone's got a lot of, let's say Uranus is the planet of living in the actual moment right now. So when you look at people who have professions who have to focus on the here and now, two big ones come to mind: musicians and professional athletes, because they can't be worried about what they ate for breakfast or what they're going to do after this is over. They need to focus on executing their skill in the moment, right here. There is no past, there is no future. They've got to play to make that play right now or play that next note. And if you start to see a lot of those patterns in a chart, you can start to piece together a story. But yeah, definitely, that could be kind of cool. The next time you got an investigation, when you've got some data and birth data on that might be interesting.
So I joke with people and say that I'm the reincarnation of Janis Joplin because she died the day before I was born.
Oh, geez. Well, there you go.
that would be a good one to look up, Janis Joplin.
Yeah, I'm sure she's in the database. I'm sure she is. In fact, I don't have the software open now, and I don't want to crash this whole system here. But I can almost guarantee you she's in there because they constantly add to it. As more celebrities are hitting the radar. Now it's like there's just a group of astrologers who just wait and try to grab so and so was born at, like, Beyonce's kid was born this day on this time. Well, that goes in. That because that's how research gets done, by looking at what people have come before, and what their traits are and how their astro signatures compare to other people who are in the here and now.
Well, Michael, this has been really interesting.
Well, cool.
Give me some stuff to think about.
I've enjoyed chatting about this stuff. As you can tell, I love talking astrology. And let me ask you, be honest, because you can't offend me. So am I as weird as you thought I was going to be, or am I more normal type of person who just happens to know astrology?
I really didn't expect anything weird, but I've had some weird people on my shows before.
Hey, and listen, I like weird is good, but I think, if people have listened to this and made it this far to the end, they can realize that, okay, it's not what I've been led to believe. And if they leave with that, and at least with a little bit of curiosity, we've done good work here today for sure.
Right. I had a guy on that was so weird that I just made up an excuse that there was a technical difficulty and I couldn't do the show. And he was talking about time travel. But it's too weird to even explain.
All right, I hear you. Yeah, well, once you step through that portal, you never know who's going to show up. So that's
well,
funny.
Thank you for not being too weird.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And seriously, let's keep up with me offline and let me know when you got something that might be interesting. And if we can get all three pieces of those information, birth date, time, and location, that'd be great. Because it's so, we'd be working with older stuff, the time probably wouldn't be as critical, but I'd like to have it if I could. But we can talk more about that offline.
Sounds awesome. And also, I will put all of your information in the description so
Cool.
people can just click on it and go straight to it. And thank you
Excellent.
for the discount, by the way.
Absolutely. No, my pleasure. I appreciate you having me, and happy to offer that to folks who might be interested, and make this stuff as accessible as we can.
And folks, don't forget that code is LISTEN, LISTEN.
That's it.
I also want to thank all you folks out there that you've joined us for the first time. I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. For my regulars, you guys rock because, well, you make it possible for me to do this. Don't forget to like. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Hit those notifications. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network